Have you ever thought why the world is unfair and takes kindness for weakness? Usually the response would be something like this. No, kindness is strength, you just need boundaries. Good people shouldn't let themselves be exploited. Which sounds reasonable until you try it and realize you're still getting fucked over, just with more self-help books on your shelf. The problem isn't that you're doing kindness wrong. The problem is that kindness itself is a rigged game. When someone says, be kind, what they're actually installing is a control program. Be pleasant, don't make waves, prioritize others over yourself, suppress anger, accept discomfort, smile through it. The kinder you are, the more exploitable you become, and this isn't a bug in the system, it's the core function. The entire concept of kindness exists within binary moral thinking. Good versus evil, right versus wrong. This binary framework is the operating system of control. It gives you two options: be good and sacrifice yourself, or be evil and protect yourself. Either way, you're trapped in the system's categories, playing by the system's rules. People sense this trap and try to escape it by inventing workarounds. Kindness with boundaries, compassion but not doormat behavior, good people who stand up for themselves. The most telling one is kindness with teeth, as if you can somehow be simultaneously submissive and assertive, prey and predator, object and subject. These constructions are laughable not in principle, but in practice. You're trying to fix a program that ain't broken. Kindness already means submission. Adding enforcement mechanisms to submission creates a paradox that collapses the moment real pressure hits. The system taught you that boundaries are selfish, anger is toxic, saying no makes you bad. Then it tells you to set boundaries while carrying all that programming. You're running contradictory code. The original malware wins every time. So the real question isn't how to be kinder or how to be kind differently. The question is whether kindness as a concept has any value at all, or whether it's just a label we paste on behavioral control mechanisms. What if instead of kindness, we talk about humanity, empathy, and authenticity, not as moral imperatives, but as states of being? Humanity isn't a performance. You don't need instructions for it. You either exist as a living subject with your own center, or you exist as an object performing roles for external validation. When you're an actual subject, when you have genuine internal coherence rather than a collection of should-be behaviors, exploitation becomes physically impossible, not through willpower or technique, but through basic incompatibility. Empathy in this framework isn't about being nice or caring about feelings. It's a perceptual capacity. When you experience yourself from the inside as a living consciousness rather than an object to be managed, you automatically recognize that same interiority in others. You can't objectify someone else when you genuinely perceive them as a subject, the same way you can't unsee light once you have functioning eyes. This is why a genuinely empathetic person can't be cruel. Cruelty works through objectification. You have to see someone as a thing to dominate or destroy them. If you perceive them as a subject, that action becomes cognitively impossible. It's like trying to stab your own hand. You don't refrain because you're kind. You refrain because you feel it as part of yourself. Authentic means connected to your actual core rather than performing a script someone installed. When you're authentic, you don't need a manual for how to behave. You're not calculating what the right action is. You're simply responding from your actual state rather than from programmed patterns. Humanity, empathy, and authenticity aren't separate qualities you combine. They're the same state viewed from different angles. When you exist as a genuine subject with a living core, empathy emerges as natural perception and authenticity becomes your default mode. You can't have one without the others. They're a different description of the same fundamental state. You won't harm others not through moral constraint, but through perceptual impossibility. You won't let yourself be used not through vigilant boundary enforcement, but through structural incompatibility with objectification. Compare this to programmed kindness. Programmed kindness requires constant monitoring and suppression. Be nice even when you don't want to. Don't show anger even when it's warranted. Put others first even when it damages you. Justify your boundaries as if your existence needs permission. Every interaction becomes a calculation of what response is acceptably good. The person operating from humanity doesn't calculate. They experience themselves and others as living centers rather than objects in a game. This creates natural limits and natural openness simultaneously. They're not trying to be anything. They're just being. When manipulators encounter programmed kindness, they see an exploitable resource. All the hooks are there: guilt, shame, fear of being bad, need for approval. They know exactly which buttons to push because those buttons were installed by the same system that created them. You're compatible components in a parasitic network. When manipulators encounter genuine subjectivity, they find nothing to connect to. You're not performing goodness, so appeals to being good don't work. You're not seeking approval, so disapproval has no leverage. You're not suppressing your actual responses, so there is no gap between what you feel and what you show. This is where the question, why do I always attract toxic people, starts making sense. You don't attract them through cosmic bad luck or unhealed wounds. You attract them through architectural compatibility. The system formatted you as prey and formatted them as predators, and then calls the resulting connection chemistry of fate. Remove yourself from that manufacturing process, and suddenly there is nothing to attract. The connection simply doesn't form. Not through effort or vigilance, because that is absolutely uncontrollable, and if you have this experience, you know what I'm talking about. It's like trying to stop a tsunami with a bucket. The connection doesn't form because the components are no longer compatible. People spend years in therapy trying to figure out why they can't maintain boundaries, why they always end up in the same dynamics, why their kindness never protects them. The answer is simple. Boundaries aren't something you build when you exist as an object. There's something that happens automatically when you exist as a subject. An object doesn't have boundaries. Your coffee cup doesn't tell you to stop pouring. Your furniture doesn't object to being used. When you've been conditioned into object consciousness, existing for others, performing for approval, regulating yourself for external comfort, boundaries become this impossible task you're constantly failing at. A subject has boundaries the same way a planet has gravity. It's not a technique or a skill. It's physics. When you have actual internal coherence, when there's a real center rather than a collection of programmed responses, other people and situations either orbit at appropriate distances or get flung out entirely. You don't decide this consciously. It happens through the simple fact of your existence as a unified field, rather than scattered fragments trying to hold shape. I've unpacked these boundary mechanics in detail in another video if you want the full breakdown. The system doesn't want you to know this. It needs you to believe that goodness requires self-sacrifice, that caring means accepting violation, that being a decent human means being endlessly available for extraction. It needs you locked in the binary of kind doormat versus cruel protected, so you never notice there's a third option that isn't on the menu. That third option is just being alive as an actual subject instead of a programmed object. Not good or bad, not kind or mean. Just present, coherent, and connected to your actual core rather than performing someone else's script about who you should be. When you're operating from that state, what looks like kindness to others is just your natural response to perceiving them as real. And what looks like boundaries to others is just the natural field of your existence. Neither one requires effort or management. They're both just physics. The person stuck in programmed kindness will hear this and panic. Without the script, who am I? Without the rules, won't I become a monster? This is the system's last defense, making you terrified of your own authentic responses. But authenticity doesn't make you cruel. It makes you incompatible with cruelty, both receiving it and performing it. You can't dominate someone you perceive as a subject. You can't be dominated when you exist as a subject. The predator-prey dynamic works through asymmetric perception. The manipulator sees you as an object to extract from, while you see them as a subject and yourself as an object in relation to them. Step out of that game entirely, and suddenly all the instructions about how to be good become irrelevant. You're not trying to be good. You're not trying to be anything. You're just existing as a living center in a field of other living centers, and from that state, certain actions become impossible while others become natural. This doesn't have anything to do with becoming a better person. Better implies optimization within the same system. This is about recognizing that the entire framework is corrupt, and you were never meant to be optimizing yourself within it in the first place. Kindness is what the system calls the behavior it wants from you. Humanity is what emerges when you're no longer performing for the system. One is a trap. The other is just what happens when you're actually alive.
Всё.
They find nothing to connect to. Connect to. Что за блядь? By inventing workarounds. Workarounds. When you genuinely perceive them. You can't objectify someone else when you genuinely perceive your... Because those buttons... Those buttons... Your compatible components. Compatibly. When you've been conditioned into... works through asymmetric perception. The predator-prey dynamic works through optimization within, and you are never meant to be optimizing yourself within it in the first place.